Welcome to Occult Mysticism channel, your portal to the hidden realms of esoteric knowledge. In today's video, we delve into lectures on ancient philosophy by Manly P. Hall, a profound exploration of timeless wisdom. This work unveils the esoteric principles of ancient traditions, from Hermetic philosophy and Pythagorean symbolism to the mystical teachings of Neoplatonism and Rosicrucianism. Join us as we summarize its key insights, guiding you through the spiritual ascent from material illusion to divine unity, illuminating the path for all seekers of truth. Manly P. Hall's lectures on ancient philosophy stands as a monumental intellectual edifice, a fervent and meticulously articulated summons to humanity to transcend the superficialities of the modern age and rediscover the profound, timeless wisdom woven into the very fabric of existence. Far from a dry academic treatise, Hall's work is an impassioned and illuminating journey through the esoteric traditions of antiquity, revealing their enduring relevance to the individual's spiritual quest and the collective destiny of civilization. With the precision of a philosopher and the evocative power of a poet, Hall argues that the ailments of contemporary society, its discord, materialism, and pervasive sense of isolation, stem directly from a fundamental misconception of reality, a forgetting of the universal principles that underpin all life. His ultimate aim is not merely to inform, but to inspire a reorientation of consciousness, leading to a state of profound peace, efficiency, and completeness rooted in the realization of one's intrinsic divinity. The odyssey into ancient thought commences with the most elusive of concepts, the nature of the absolute. Hall, acknowledging its incomprehensibility, paints it as the nothing and the all, best symbolized by a clean, blank sheet of paper. This boundless, measureless, eternal space is the ultimate source and destination of all things, yet it remains eternally unmoved and unchanged. From this undifferentiated void, the first stirrings of manifestation appear as a dot, the absolute conceived as the one. This dot is simultaneously the first illusion, a necessary limitation of infinite space, which, once individuated as spirit, becomes a localized center of power, bound by specific limitations. In its primordial expression, this dot then elongates into a line, representing motion, growth, and the outward outpouring of life, akin to the sun's rays emanating from its fiery heart. Finally, the circle emerges, defining the circumference or limit of this expansion, the boundary where central energy dissipates into outer darkness. These three foundational symbols, dot, line, and circle, are, for Hall, the supreme and primary symbols, embodying universal consciousness, intelligence, and force, respectively. They are the keys to all knowable existence, a threefold unknowable cause. Hall deftly extends this tripartite symbolism to the human experience and the evolution of knowledge. Philosophy, with its quest for fundamental truths and minimal distortion, aligns with the pure, unblemished dot. Theology, characterized by its mutable dogmas and emotional fluctuations, is the line, representing the motion of philosophy moving away from its fixed essence. Science, immersed in the tangible and concerned only with measurable phenomena, is the circle, confined to the periphery of material existence. He critiques modern science for its tendency to dismiss the invisible, arguing that while it may reveal a supertheology in the dance of atoms, it is philosophy that illuminates the true, impersonal, and infinite creative principle. The intellectual ascent of humanity, Hall suggests, is a journey from the limited perspective of science, through the emotional realm of theology to the expansive wisdom of philosophy. He highlights that what appears as empty space is, in fact, an incomprehensible fullness, a spiritual solid where true reality resides, in stark contrast to the physical world, which is merely a spiritual vacuum. This initial chapter sets the stage for a grand narrative, where every aspect of the cosmos, from divine emanations to human experience, is viewed through the lens of these primary symbols and their intricate interrelationships. The exploration deepens in God, the divine foundation, where Hall challenges conventional, anthropomorphic concepts of deity. He posits that the causeless cause is not an active or passive entity, but power in absolute suspension, an enduring neitherness. While admitting the human mind's inherent limitation in grasping such ultimates, he champions a fundamental monotheism manifesting through an elaborate polytheism. Here, gods are not literal individuals, but vast centers of radiant force or symbolic representations of individual states of consciousness within the boundless absolute. The common human tendency to mold God in one's own image reflects a limited understanding. True comprehension reveals a growing God whose stupendous nature unfolds as human capacity expands. Hall introduces the concept of an androgynous deity, the Great Father-Mother, from whom the dual potencies of masculine and feminine emerge in equilibrium. This division is not an external act, but an internal interaction within the unified deity, with the masculine principle traditionally associated with active force and the feminine with receptive matter. The Hebrew Kabbalists' Ein Sof and its manifestation as Kether, the jewel-encrusted crown from which all beings proceed, serves as another powerful symbol for this first, indefinable manifestation of the Absolute. Hall meticulously clarifies that Kether, like the concept of God itself, is a hypothetical point. Within Absolute Self, a focal point through which infinite being flows into impermanent existence. The profound question arises, what causes the Absolute, with its forces in suspension, to periodically spawn gods and worlds? Hall proposes the audacious concept of periodicity, defining it as the habit of infinite space. Drawing an analogy to human sleep and awakening, he suggests that just as habit compels a sleeper to rouse without conscious will, so too does the inherent eternal habit of the Absolute periodically spawn forth worlds and draw them back again. This perpetual ebb and flow, like an eternal sea, is the cosmic law that governs creation and dissolution. Man's evolving concept of God mirrors this cosmic progression, from a physical personality, the circle, to a mental individuality, the line, to a spiritual entity, the dot, finally aspiring to the formless, definitionless absolute space itself, the blank sheet. Hall starkly contrasts the ancient world's belief in the invisible as real with the modern world's insistence on the visible, arguing that the ephemeral nature of physical forms pales in comparison to the eternal, indestructible essence of space, which, far from being empty, is an incomprehensible fullness. He concludes by illustrating the hierarchical order of gods, determined by their proximity to the central creative fire, each a monad overseeing subordinate powers, forming a grand chain of dependencies where each deity is both a creator and a creation, ultimately serving as parts of the Great Monad, that is, the foundation of the universe. Illumined mind, the universal savior, delves into the nature of spiritual manifestation and the path to higher consciousness. Light serves as the quintessential symbol of manifesting spirit, its radiant outpouring represented by the line, descending from the dot. Hall uses the candle flame as an analogy, the blue heart as the dark hidden father, the golden radiance as the bright flaming sun, and the reddish smoky circumference as the demiurgus, the lord of the world. This tripartite nature of fire has, for ages, symbolized the threefold God. Radiance itself is the ceaseless effort of a central force to expand, met by the continual pressure from without exerted by substance, a cosmic dance of expansion and resistance mirroring the individual's spiritual struggle against the inertia of materiality. Growth, in this context, is the soul's struggle to control its environment, expanding its sphere of self-knowing until, at the gate of the Absolute, it sheds all external pressure and diffuses back into existence. The line is further elaborated as a potential cosmic nerve ray, connecting the center of existence to its circumference, serving as the messenger between cause and effect. It embodies the vital principle of growth, pushing latent seed germs of power within every atom into active manifestation. Reaffirming the Pythagorean principle, Hall states that the foundation of all existence is triangular: spirit, body, and the linking element between them. This intermediary realm is crucial, for the abstractly spiritual cannot affect the concretely material without a hierarchy of mediatory agencies. Drawing analogies to alchemy, Mercury as the blending element, and mythology, Mercury as the messenger god, Hall illustrates how this middle ground reconciles opposites like divine truth and human ignorance. He then introduces the concept of god-men or man-gods, as these divine mediators, beings like Pythagoras or Jesus, who possess consciousness of both the superior and inferior realms. Man's status in the cosmos, therefore, is determined by the quality of his thinking, which, when refined, allows him to transcend bestial ignorance and approach the knowing state of the gods. The universe is divided into a central twilight zone of mind, with an upper hemisphere for divine beings, Ben Elohim, and a lower hemisphere for redeemed souls, Aishim, where descending demigods meet ascending supermen. Knowledge itself is twofold, revealed from celestial beings and evolved by man. The chapter culminates in a profound exposition of the dying God, Mythos, revealing its secret teaching: mind itself is the savior God. Mind, the eternal and universal Prometheus, must ultimately be sacrificed because, while it links consciousness and unconsciousness, it relies on comparison and differentiation, preventing it from attaining the absolute unity of consciousness. The goal is to move beyond mere intellect to perfect consciousness, a universal sea, where diversity is totally annihilated and the individual is one and indivisible from the I in all. Hall vividly illustrates this with the poignant story of the Korean monk who achieves realization by falling from a tower and the Buddhist sage Daruma shattering a prized potted plant to convey the unutterable. The dragon carp, swimming against the current of illusion to become an immortal, symbolizes this arduous yet triumphant journey towards nirvana, where the lesser mingles with the greater. The inferior creation and its regent extends the Platonic triad of the one unity, the beautiful motion, and the good manifestation to a deeper understanding of the material world. Here, the world is synonymous with good, a form molded from matter that, paradoxically, acts as the eternal adversary. Hall asserts that form has ever been regarded as the parent of ignorance, imprisoning consciousness within its limitations. He likens form to the reaping skeleton of death, calling it Typhon in Egypt and Shiva in India, a destructive force that, by breaking old orders, makes way for reconstruction on higher levels. This material universe, despite its vastness and diversity, is essentially the underworld, Hades, a land of death, where the light of spirit is obscured and creatures move in the haze of uncertainty. The physical plane is a sphere where 4/5 of inertia blend with 1/5 of activity, leaving most spiritual potential latent. The allegory of Ishtar's descent through the 7 worlds of matter vividly illustrates how the incarnating rational soul is stripped of its divine attributes by the 7 limitations of matter, the planetary rings. Like the wide-eyed babe, the spiritual man becomes helpless and impotent in the physical world, clouded by veils of the 7 planets. This descent is involution, while evolution is the soul's resurrection from this state, exemplified by the prodigal son returning from the pigsty of the physical universe to the Father's light world. Hall describes the stupefying effect of matter as akin to cold, which numbs the inner nature and destroys spiritual initiative, fostering indifference. Pain, mental, physical, and emotional, is the harsh catalyst that forces man to recognize the insufficiency of material accomplishments and seek knowledge for its own sake. The chapter then dissects the Demiurgus, the lord of form, also known as Jehovah, Zeus, or Jupiter. This heartless one is the slave driver of the cycle of necessity, controlling birth and death within the world of forms. Hall explores the ancient debate: is the Demiurgus evil or merely the eternal contrast to good, a master who whips man into self-improvement? He connects this to the pharaoh's 3 scepters: the Anubis-headed staff, wisdom, the shepherd's crook faith, and the flail force symbols of rulership. These, in turn, are tied to the dot, line, and circle, representing government by state, church, and people, whose perversions lead to the Masonic trio of evils, ignorance, superstition, and fear. Humanity, dwelling in this underworld of mortal light and spiritual darkness, is in an embryonic state, an antechamber of cosmos, a great egg within which fetal man is being prepared for birth into the greater universe. The concept of 2 births and 2 deaths is introduced. The first birth is into the irrational sphere, a philosophic death where the higher self remains asleep. The second birth is the death of the lower nature, where the rational part reawakens and escapes matter forever. Reincarnation is clarified as the spiritual causal nature projecting successive, ephemeral personalities that are ultimately reabsorbed, rather than the same personality enduring. The wheel of necessity diagram graphically illustrates the spiral path of individualized consciousness within the cosmic egg, breaking through the ring-past knot to return to universal consciousness. Alchemy, with its goal of transmuting base metals into universal gold, the rational soul, serves as a symbolic parallel for this process of spiritual liberation, culminating in the adept becoming a philosopher's stone, one who has escaped the wheel of birth and death. Hall concludes by re-emphasizing that liberation is achieved by elevating consciousness beyond material and intellectual spheres to spiritual realization, for selfishness binds one to the inferno. In The Annihilation of the Sense of Diversity, Hall posits that we are what our consciousness is. Gods are not distant personalities, but cosmic planes or modes of realization. Thus, one who attains Buddhahood is not a Buddha, but the Buddha merged with the universal light. This radical idea implies that if one moves and feels in terms of materiality, one is materiality. A criminal is crime. One who hates is hate, embodying the universal condition. Buddhist multi-armed and multi-headed figures symbolize these various extensions and modes of consciousness. The gods, as divine attributes, become flesh in those mortal creatures who have unfolded and given expression within themselves to those godlike attributes. Hall beautifully illustrates this through figures like Kuan Yin, Kwanan, the goddess of mercy, embodying compassionate consciousness, and Jizo, the god of little children, representing boundless compassion for infant humanity, piling up heaps of stones, worldly endeavors. Maitreya, the Buddhist messiah, personifies the consciousness of hope, continually manifesting as circumstances that guide worlds and individuals towards the absolute. Hall then presents a profound model of consciousness expansion using the Ptolemaic system of astronomy as an esoteric diagram. The Earth at the center represents absolute ignorance, surrounded by planetary spheres: Moon, Mercury, Venus, Sun, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, culminating in the circle of the zodiac, and beyond that, the empyrean of absolute wisdom. The mystic's ascent involves piercing these successive walls of limitation through realization, not merely rising in consciousness, but the inferior self ascending through various levels of consciousness to ultimate union with the all-knowing. The universal self is an immense sunburst, with petals of emanations representing different states of reality, like wine diluted in water, where the wine will actually undergo no change, and regardless of how much water is added, it will still remain a single substance. The annihilation of diversity unfolds through 7 rings of consciousness, each representing an increasing inclusiveness. First ring, savage, limited to self-preservation, ruled by fear and hatred, complete isolation. Second ring, family blood relations, includes a limited number of external objects, self-accepts family as part of self-Shylock's plea. Third ring, friendship tribe nation, realization expands to include strangers, then tribe nation, patriotism, still an accentuated egotism. Fourth ring, race, moves to racial concerns, establishing comparisons, often prejudices. Sun as middle point in astrology. Fifth ring, world philosophy, realizes human life as a single unit, encompasses all races and species without distinction. The world is my country, and to do good is my religion. Philosophy proper begins here. Sixth ring, universe bodhisattva, transcends individual concerns, becomes a citizen of the universe, kinship with sun, moon, stars. These are the elder brothers at the gateway of liberation. Seventh ring, absolute nirvana, the final annihilation of illusion. The sage hurls the blazing thunderbolt of his will, and the iridescent bubble of being bursts, merging with the endless sea of the absolute. This ultimate state is one where words fail, thoughts fail, as demonstrated by the shattered potted plant of Daruma. Only through personal realization, not verbal explanation, can this truth be known. Hall concludes with the powerful image of Moses leading his people to the Promised Land, but not entering it himself, symbolizing how mind, the universal Savior, dies at the gate of nirvana, while the souls he has redeemed pass on to perfection. The Disciplines of Salvation outlines the practical means by which an individual can cultivate the rational intellect and achieve realization. Hall emphasizes that salvation is not a passive reception, but the product of definite philosophic disciplines. Drawing from Pythagoras, he highlights 3 essential sciences: mathematics, music, and astronomy. He critiques modern education, which, unlike ancient systems, often fails to equip the mind for sustained rational activity, leading to superficiality and the insufficiency of the foundation upon which the structure of life is erected. Pythagoras, through these sciences, instilled order, rationality, and comparative values, revealing cosmic verities and the unchangeable nature of number. Mathematics, the father of the sciences, is the dot of the triad, revealing the mysteries of the invisible causal sphere and the exactness of cosmic method. Music, the line, blends the real and ideal, softening the austerity of numbers and revealing the moods of the causal nature through harmony and rhythm. Astronomy, the circle, establishes the magnitude of reality, impressing the individual with cosmic scale and fostering tolerance. These disciplines, when approached with dedication, inspire a love for life, awe for divine jurisprudence, and a realization of the individual's place in the universal plan. Hall introduces three prerequisites of knowing, observation, discrimination, and concentration. Observation, not merely seeing, but perfection of seeing, discerning the inner constitution of objects, the life behind the form, and the wholeness of things. It's about seeing with the mind, not just the eye, and recognizing the interconnectedness of all phenomena. Discrimination, the science of values, the ability to unerringly recognize that which is chief among seemingly equal objects. This involves organizing things by value, from primary to secondary, ultimately differentiating between permanence and impermanence, reality and unreality. Hall dissects various inferiority and superiority complexes as manifestations of a lack of true discrimination, which is rooted in intellectual honesty and an impersonal attitude. Concentration, focalizing all energies upon a single, noble goal, maintaining a state of fixation until the goal is achieved. It demands continuity and a unified effort of the faculties, leading to potencies never dreamed of. Hall contrasts the reclusive hermit's easy but less potent concentration with the acid test of concentration amidst confusion, where no sense perceptions are left unoccupied. These disciplines, when combined, lead to a rational penetration that allows the aspirant to fearlessly knock at the portals of the house of wisdom. Hall outlines a Pythagorean diagram showing how the threefold divinity, one, beautiful, good, manifests through secondary triads of knowledge: philosophy, theology, science, and methods of mind, discrimination, concentration, observation, ultimately linking to physical arts and sciences, mathematics, music, astronomy. This interconnectedness ensures that the unfoldment of the inferior stimulated unfoldment of its analogy in the superior. Hall warns against natural psychic powers without rational discipline, comparing such individuals to animals who possess psychic abilities but lack the capacity to direct them, ultimately suffering a brutish end. The doctrine of redemption through grace challenges Christian theology's interpretation of salvation, particularly the doctrine of vicarious atonement. Hall criticizes the early church's advocacy of extreme austerities and the notion of salvation by belief alone, arguing that a faith that damns infants for lack of baptism is cruel enough to espouse such doctrines and inevitably inspires cruelty. He contrasts the God of tears with the God of joy, quoting Eugene O'Neill's Lazarus Laughed, to emphasize the eternal laughter of God and the illusion of death. Hall meticulously traces how Christianity borrowed from paganism, appropriating its concepts of heaven and hell, angelic hierarchies, and divine symbols. He argues that the shallowness of Christianity is a direct result of the clumsy efforts made to improve upon the ancient doctrines. He asserts that the integrity of the individual was the keystone of pagan idealistic philosophy, where right thinking and right living were prerequisites for right being, in stark contrast to the most indefensible and at the same time the most vicious of all superstitions, vicarious atonement. This doctrine, he argues, undermined the morale of Christendom, leading to a philosophy of special privileges and exceptions, and a history written in letters of blood. He analyzes the concept of God's personality, arguing that to invest God with human traits is to degrade him to the estate of man. Impersonality for Hall is a divine attribute, and prophets' face-to-face interviews are symbolic inner experiences concerned with extensions of consciousness and degrees of realization. He presents a diagram of three intersecting globes: the causal universe, spirit, divine law, the intermediate sphere, soul, love, and the inferior universe, matter, natural law. The inferior universe operates on law, the intermediate on love, and the causal on divine law. St. Paul's grace are ye saved through faith, and that not of yourselves, it is the gift of God, not of works, is reinterpreted. Works are seen as outward activities, an illusion, and the individual must cast aside the outer life with its endless diversity of interest to focus solely on the spiritual nature. Hall contextualizes this viewpoint as a product of physically insecure ages, but contrasts it with the modern emphasis on physical existence and convenience. He observes that the spirit of democracy has invaded even the domain of spirit, with man daring to question divine mandates. The demiurgus, once a feared autocrat, is now seen as a subordinate deity whose thunder only affects those who believe in ignorance, fear, and death. Hall envisions a new religion that will worship God in his creative aspect, superior to his preservative, Christos, and destructive Jehovistic aspects. The true relationship of the Trinity will reveal the significance of salvation through grace. Christ Christos, the rational soul, is the divine fire that awakens latent immortality in man. Hall suggests 3 methods for this spiritual impregnation: works, fighting the good fight; love, faith, belief, service, and philosophy, contemplating wisdom. These lead to a crowning state of apotheosis or ecstasy, a bolt of fire that breaks the demiurgus's power and allows the tree of the soul to grow. The Golden Age saw the rational soul in control, and the vicarious atonement symbolizes the spirit of beauty within man that can accomplish what he cannot achieve alone. This heaven-man, Christos in us, redeems his own sinful shadows, leading to spiritual healing, clarity of vision, and freedom from worldly desires, all through the cultivation of appreciation, the esteem felt for others, and the receptivity to the beautiful. The mission of aesthetics posits aesthetics not merely as a study of beauty, but as a profound philosophic discipline for perfecting human consciousness and creating a harmonious civilization. Hall questions whether aesthetic standards are solely environmental or stem from an intrinsic human drive towards harmony. He defines beauty as the harmonious correlation of parts, a force into the presence of which none can come and remain unmoved. Tracing the evolution of beauty from primitive, two-dimensional art to classical Greek simplicity, he argues that complexity is used to conceal weakness and simplicity to reveal strength. Greek art's superiority lay in its ability to embody an idea with utter simplicity, where the idea was paramount and labor ceased once beauty was objectively expressed. Hall critiques the art for art's sake mentality, asserting that art is a medium for expressing eternal verities, not an end in itself. The technician, obsessed with method, risks losing sight of the ultimate purpose. He emphasizes that the arts and sciences are sacred, meant to be developed not for their own sake, but for the sake of those inner convictions. Aesthetics, therefore, equips consciousness to discern and enhance beauty, virtue, and utility, the true characteristics of divinity. Socrates' triad of beauty, virtue, and necessity forms the core, the most beautiful of all things, that which is the most virtuous and the most necessary. Hall laments the divorce of beauty and utility in modern civilization, leading to crassness and the collapse of societal structures, likening it to a fire-belching dragon guarding the golden fleece of happiness. He paints a vivid picture of modern urban landscapes, Wall Street as a gloomy ravine leading to Dante's Inferno, filled with souls lost in greed, and critiques the cyclopean struggle of civilization where destruction is ever the victor. He echoes Prospero's prophecy from The Tempest that all man-made monuments will dissolve. Hall observes a widening gap between man's internal progress and his conveniences, arguing that physical immortality pursued by science, devoid of spiritual understanding, is a spiritual darkness. He envisions a future where a vast and beautiful institution will integrate aesthetic needs with efficiency, ensuring life is both effective and beautiful. The chapter then delves into the compound nature of man, viewing the human body as a failed democracy, composed of warring microcosmic social systems, e.g., the brain's over 40 lesser brains. Without an inner autocrat, disorder reigns. Hall posits that external human conflicts, crime, war, disease, reflect internal disquietude. Historical figures like Alexander, Caesar, and Napoleon personify the will to power, unifying belligerent elements towards conquest. Yet, this very conquest, by eliminating external obstacles, leads to internal dissension. Hall concludes that true power lies not in external force, but in the appreciation of beauty and the development of internal harmony. The warring segments of a personality can only be unified by a common purpose and right motive, leading to cooperation rather than grotesque absurdity. Citing Plotinus, Hall explains how beauty flows from the first beauty to permeate intellect, soul, and body, allowing the rationality of the beholder to rejoice in the evidence of rationality in the thing beheld. He closes with the vision of a future civilization, no longer enslaved to greed, but creating an environment that draws forth nobler souls and establishing itself upon virtue, beauty, and utility, forever enduring. The cycle of necessity addresses the fundamental questions of life's beginning, love's fulfillment, and death's end. Hall argues that physical existence is merely a fragment of a nobler and more complete cycle of duration, and that a true understanding of universal order is essential for right living. He delves into the nature of time, contrasting the fleeting now of fools with the eternal philosophic now, where past, present, and future are embraced. Hall asserts that all men worship either life or death. Philosophers worship life by affirming its imperishability, while the non-philosophic worship death by accepting it as a reality. Life, being essentially incorporeal, is everywhere, not with interval but impartibly, animating forms by its proximity and causing death by its withdrawal. Hall introduces Homer's Odyssey cave allegory as a profound symbol of the mystery of life and death. The cave, consecrated to the Naiades, souls proceeding into generation, represents the world as a temple sacred to the processes of generation and, esoterically, the womb from which the philosophic elect are liberated by the second birth. The elements within the cave bowls and urns, bodies, purple web's fleshly body, honey, mortal pleasure, befuddling divinity, and bees, just souls returning to divine condition, all symbolize aspects of the soul's journey through generation and its entrapment by transient pleasures. The two gates of the cave represent the winter and summer solstices, Capricorn and Cancer, symbolizing the descent of souls into generation and their ascent to the gods, guided by the north and south winds respectively. The branching olive tree above the cave, the plant of Minerva, signifies divine wisdom ordering the universe. The cycle of necessity is the period of the soul's pilgrimage through continuous births and deaths, reincarnation, an unawakened soul trapped in monotonous motion. This cycle is a great death and great birth on a cosmic scale, where physical existence is a minor mystery. Hall stresses that true immortality is not merely continued existence after death, but a conscious, enduring awareness achieved through philosophic perception. He critiques theological heavens as attenuated earths or animal paradises that merely perpetuate earthly desires, and hells as self-generated states born of stupid fears. The allegorical act of Parsifal dispelling Klingor's chimerical world symbolizes how rational perceptions can shatter these illusory worlds. Man's passage between life and death is a constant exchange of vestments, not a liberation from ignorance until he steps down from the wheel of desire. Hall reiterates his unique view of reincarnation, not the transmigration of a fixed personality, but the spiritual, causal nature projecting a chain of individualized lives that are ultimately reabsorbed. The spiral path within the egg of existence leads either to escape from generation or continued immersion. He contrasts the sleeping souls, immersed in form, with wakening souls, beginning to cultivate realization, and awakened souls, liberated masters of inner existence. Love, defined by Plato as the longing of diversity for unity, is the law of the soul, contrasting with reason, intellect, and generation body. The feeling of isolation in the gloomy dungeon of physical life is a consequence of diversity, which love seeks to overcome by mingling separate lives in mystical communion. Hall delves into the philosophical implications of sex, asserting that spirit is inherently androgynous, manifesting duality only in the sphere of generation. He interprets human love as a reciprocal emotional flow between subjective and objectified natures. The law of consequence, karma, cause and effect, governs the vicious circle of action and reaction within the cycle of necessity. Karma applies only to irrational creatures whose clouded perceptions lead to destructive reaction. Philosophy, by annihilating diversity, ultimately dissolves these laws of action and reaction, life and death, which are mere illusional elements. The goal is to escape the vast turmoil of ephemeral agencies by realizing one's enduring and imperishable nature, becoming master of my fate, captain of my soul. This requires seeing one's bodies as shadows and recognizing the formless, unchanging self as the true reality. Hall concludes with the profound assertion that ignorance and death, which are synonymous in their inner nature, are indeed the last great adversary. Pagan theogony and cosmogony presents a sweeping overview of ancient creation myths, demonstrating their underlying philosophical unity despite superficial differences. Thomas Taylor's summary of Platonic theology reveals a beauteous progeny of principles, proceeding from the immense principle of principles, culminating in the unity of unities, the monad of monads, the principle of principles, the God of gods. This philosophic atheism, God as principle, not personality, is, for Hall, the supremacy of philosophy's God. Emanationism, where every cause generates similars prior to dissimilars, is the vital doctrine that explains how infinite diversity proceeds in sequential order from simple unity. Hall details the 7 grand divisions of existence in Neoplatonism: principle of principles, being, life, intellect, soul, nature, body, showing how monadic forces are suspended from the supreme unity. Adam, for example, is the monad of mankind, from whom all human beings derive their qualities. He then delves into Orphic theogony, beginning with unborn, unaging, and undying time, absolute, from which emerge ether, bound active, and chaos, infinity passive. Their interaction forms the Orphic or cosmic egg, encircled by the serpent ether. The bursting egg reveals Phanes, the triple dragon god and divine or absolute animal, a winged, bodiless being symbolizing spiritual light and life, identified with Ezekiel's cherubim and the 4 hierarchies of the zodiac. Phane's consort, threefold night, in turn produces heaven and earth, noumenon and phenomenon, whose union brings forth the Fates, karmic powers, centimani, and cyclopes builders, and finally the Titans, led by Cronus, who rebel and establish the material sphere, later overthrown by Zeus. Hall asserts that the Vedic writings of the Hindus were the chief source for Orphic theogony, with Thales and Pythagoras initiated into Brahman mysteries. He summarizes the Vishnu Purana's creation myth. Brahma, supreme, eternal, exists as Purusha, spirit, and Kala, time, then Vishnu, active, assumes the roles of creator, Brahma, preserver, Vishnu, and destroyer, Shiva. The interplay of Purusha, Pradhana, primary matter, chaos, and Kala leads to the manifestation of Mahat, intellect, threefold egotism, and the elements, ether, wind, light, water, earth, which combine to form the cosmic egg. Vishnu then devours and recreates the universe cyclically through Kalpas, Brahma's days, periods of incomprehensible magnitude. The Varaha boar incarnation of Vishnu is depicted restoring the earth from the deep waters, praised by sages as the stern-eyed upholder of the universe. The Chinese cosmogony from the Yi King offers a direct, uncluttered parallel. The pagan universe is living heaven and living earth, not dead matter. The problem for theology is creation from nothing. Philosophy offers eternal duration of matter, universal root matter, I-Yen, as the ever-existing seed ground. Qian, the supreme god, emanates 2 heirs, Yang, subtle spirit, and Yin, coarse matter, whose mingling produces all generation. Shangte, the sky emperor, embodies the triad of heaven, earth, and man, with Puanku as the demiurgus, protagonist, first man. The Chinese Kalpa Yuan is analogous to the year, divided into 12 hui, with seasons symbolizing creation, growth, maturity, and decay. Huanku, surviving the deluge, becomes he, Noah, Shek, and Adam, establishing new humanity, even appearing as a fish god. Hall marvels at the unanimity of agreement among ancient sages, contrasting it with the maze of contradictions of modern, superficial thought. He concludes that God manifests his will in the endless progression and change, and man's quest for knowledge is the God in man seeking the God in all. Mathematics, the master science, celebrates mathematics as the divine science that establishes order in the universe. Pythagoras defined it as the science of magnitudes and multitudes, capable of revealing fundamental relationships, cause and effect, and chronological order. Hall argues that mathematics predates history, its principles eternal and divine, acting as the mode whereby the magnitude and duration of that motion are rendered conceivable. Number itself, from which all numbers are suspended, is synonymous with God, the first motion of deity. The numerals are not multiples of 1 renuli, unity, but its fractional parts, meaning that 2 is unity considered in terms of halves. And philosophic addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division always result in 1 wholeness or cipher, the absolute. This illustrates that unity is synonymous with cause and diversity with effect. Hall details the Pythagorean pyramid of numbers, diverging from the apex wholeness to an infinity of fragmentary parts, base, a symbol of how the unity of life is broken up by forms. He connects this to monadology and the atomic theory, where atoms are archetypal unities of wholeness, embodying the same quality of wholeness regardless of size. Man, as an archetypal wholeness, shares in the virtues of the archetype, manifesting through laws like polarity, generation, and rationality. Time, for Hall, is the mysterious fourth dimension, an elastic quality that includes place and occurrence. He differentiates between physical distance and qualitative interval, which is the true space between spirit cube A and matter cube B, a chasm so vast that the one may be totally unaware of the existence of the other. This qualitative interval can only be measured by a fourth tool of the reason, a fourth-dimensional consciousness. He critiques the popular fallacy that God dwells in the furthermost angle of the heavens, stemming from a confusion of qualitative and spatial distance. Realization, by eliminating these qualitative intervals, leads to nirvana, the ultimate annihilation of all separation, where the lesser self is merged with its ultimate goal, the greater self. He delves into Platonic converging nullities, explaining negative affirmations, e.g., God is no thing, which implies God exceeds thing in excellence, and affirmative negations. He asserts that theological systems that uphold duality, good and evil, are unsound, for good continually inclines toward unity or wholeness, while evil will ultimately destroy itself by the continual controversy between its parts. Perfect numbers whose fractional parts sum to themselves are rare like virtues, while superabundant and diminished numbers are common like vices. This conflict of rationality and irrationality is like two ends fighting the middle, where only equilibrium, the one, is stable. Life and death, like all numbers except one, partake of manyness and are impermanent. The numerative soul within man, a monad itself, imposes form and subsistence upon numbers, allowing sums to be perceived as wholes. Hall concludes that man, the unconditioned principle, is obscured by men, the infinite diversity. Demigods and Supermen explores the nuanced hierarchy of spiritual beings and the path to rational liberation. Socrates' tools, irony and inductive reasoning, are key. Irony represents fate, revealing that all things are destined to return to their own natures, while inductive reasoning allows particulars like man to retire into their generals, man, the archetype. Hall asserts that philosophy, accordingly, is peculiarly adapted to the fields of generals, while science has an affinity for the field of particulars. True growth means permeating consciousness with the realization of wholeness, as personality inclines toward diversity and principles toward unity. He critiques modern philosophical speculation, which often elevates particulars to the dignity of a general, leading to philosophic absurdity and short-sightedness, e.g., science claiming to be the sole monad of rationality. Hall argues that true induction is the quest of wholeness through particulars, leading to a state of equilibrium between induction and deduction. He emphasizes the retrospective mode, cause from effect, recommended by Pythagoras, which, by revealing the enormity of consequences, instills a sense of responsibility, showing that the living are ruled by the dead, the present is ruled by the past. Hall then elaborates on the orders of gods, demigods, supermen, and mortals. Gods, possessing intrinsic realization of wholeness, are incapable of descending to terms of diversity, unlike man who can ascend to them. Immortality is not the survival of personality, but the merging of a mortal nature with an immortal nature. He reveals that the universe contains orders of life beyond the perception of the limited faculties now at man's disposal, some dwelling along the shores of the air, Socrates. These beings represent degrees of wholeness or spiritual impulses, requiring more refined vehicles than human bodies. Hall addresses the misconception of gods as arbitrary creations, clarifying them as principles, whose omnipresence means their influence is equally common to all men and to all places. The birthdays of the gods symbolize the moment when human rationality first participates in their divine effulgence. Proclus's account of heated paper bursting into flames near fire illustrates how divine natures are communicated to receptive corporeal bodies. The Egyptian inverted and upright pyramids symbolize inspiration and aspiration, commingling at the point of superiors. The Socratic maxim, "Where thou art, is the place to learn," reveals the universality of cause, though a quality interval separates the learner from true learning. Hall notes that man's auric egg, or soul envelope, isolates him in embryonic individualism. Humanity, exemplifying dissimilars, mixes like oil and water, while divinity, exemplifying similars, mingles as oils. Overcoming this sense of separateness is the path to immortality. Emerson's concept of the oversoul begins with the natal daemon, an invisible patron spirit assigned to every individual at birth, analogous to a totem. This daemon is the composite self, a blossoming of soul qualities, embodying the sum of past experiences and innate impulses that protect the individual from self-undoing. Apuleius's account of Plato's daemon describes it as a witness and guardian of one's conduct, dwelling in the most profound recesses of the mind as a sort of conscience. Olympiodorus further clarifies the natal daemon as the supreme flower of the soul, the diamond soul, born of experience and akin to the spirit of the number 6, which bestows the consciousness of the senses upon the corporeal. Heroes, aspiring beyond ordinary mortals, are guided by a more exalted essential daemon, the father star, unapproachable by those still serving sense perceptions. Ulysses' blinding of the Cyclops, his self-will, symbolizes the necessary destruction of the natal daemon's power for divine will to take its place. The philosophy of daemons recognizes rational intelligence in all forms of life, from scudding clouds to tiny gnomes. These daemons are spontaneously produced through combinations of forces, substances, or circumstances, becoming patrons of such combinations until their return to simplicity. Emerson's oversoul is presented as this common heart, the great nature in which we rest, the unity that underlies all particular beings. It is the supreme critic and only prophet, revealing the common ground of existence and compelling sincerity. As consciousness verges toward cause, it moves towards simplicity. As it moves away, it inclines towards complexity. Man, as an oversoul of men, is the anthropos, the archetypal one from whom the many issue, a vast sphere of influence that men cannot escape because it is their common life. Hall explores the Neoplatonic distinction between man's inferior nature, descending into generation, and his true self, remaining a silent watcher, an Atman residing in pure rationality. This invisible greatness of man is the overbrooding divinity that guides the mortal part. The human soul, a generation and thus a body, is the chief of forms, inheriting a fullness of virtues. Man possesses many bodies, invisible to earthly senses, each a vehicle of definite potentialities. The fruitage of physical experience, a subtle substance or pabulum extracted from incident, becomes the soul's essential nutriment, metamorphosing into soul qualities. The soul manifests through a duad of positive and negative channels, a beautiful and radiant spirit, intuition, remembering principles from ages of endeavor, and an evil and rebellious spirit. Conscience, the still, small voice of unremembered suffering. These dual aspects guard the mystic gate between the outer and inner self. The allegory of Cupid and Psyche, tracing the soul's journey, is then unveiled. Psyche, born of royal parentage, divine lineage, and of surpassing beauty, vexes Venus, the mother of generations, carnality. Cupid, sent to humble her, falls in love, but their union is spiritual. Psyche's sisters, mortal instincts, lure her to seek Cupid's physical form, causing her to lose her heavenly palace and wander the earth, burdened by labors of life, Venus's tasks. The casket of beauty, brought from Hades, contains Stygian sleep, ignorance, from which Cupid, rational love, rescues her, leading to her immortality and becoming the mother of joy. This allegory, like the prodigal son, emphasizes the integrity of man's superior part and the triumph of inner divinity over physical impediments. Exoteric and esoteric knowledge distinguishes between two forms of wisdom. Exoteric knowledge is the familiar, the knowledge of particulars, communicable facts acquired through the senses and the physical mind. It includes all that can be recorded, discoursed upon, or debated. Esoteric knowledge, conversely, is concerned with the inherent nature of knowledge itself, those superessential elements of the pure intellect sphere where form, as man knows it, does not exist. This wisdom is unknowable to the mortal intellect and cannot be communicated through ordinary language, which dims the lucidity of the inner nature. Hall critiques modern science for its inability to penetrate the esoteric realm, being incapable of analyzing itself or functioning independently of matter. He asserts that the mysteries of antiquity were the true custodians of wisdom, using unique telepathic systems and mysterious electrical fluid to transmit knowledge directly to the inner perceptions of initiates, bypassing the limitations of words and material forms. He cites Greek familiarity with electricity and the electrified heads, depicted in Samothracian mysteries, as evidence of this supersensuous comprehension. He argues that proficiency in certain arts and sciences, like mathematics, sculpture, and dialectics, stimulates the sensitivity of superphysical rational faculties. Mathematics refines the mind to exactitude, sculpture cultivates beauty by chipping away the rough exterior, and dialectics makes the mind flexible and sufficient for any and every contingency. Musicians, through harmonics and rhythm, refine their emotional nature to hear the music of the spheres. Philosophers, discoursing on divine order, speak better than they know, becoming mouthpieces for an immortal agent. Hall laments that modern education, focused on utilitarian problems, often produces abortive or hopelessly mediocre results, failing to draw forth the mighty genius within students, instead scribbling conventional platitudes onto their minds. He highlights the corruption that crept into its ethical institutes as the cause of Pagandom's decadence, leading the hierophants to retire and the mysteries to become mongers of empty words. This betrayal of trust also awaits the modern seeker, as education often leaves youth unfitted for life. Hall critiques the enslavement of the intellect by education, which prioritizes memory over true thought, producing intellectual corpses. He advocates for idealist educators who can see the beautiful in all things. The discussion transitions to symbolism, the universal language, although this topic is deeply interwoven throughout the text, particularly in the preceding chapter's discourse on esoteric knowledge. Hall defines a symbol as a form designed to portray abstract qualities, conveying an impression beyond its literal appearance. Symbols are meant to preserve ideas in an indefinite state, protecting their lucidity from unnecessary form involvement. He distinguishes symbolism from caricature, noting that while both distort, symbols emphasize the real by eliminating the unnecessary, revealing processes through diagrams. Symbolism is the perfect medium of education, stimulating the mind, reflecting its moods, and drawing forth the individual's own understanding. Man begins to know as soon as he divests himself of the illusion that the universe is material and matter the divine reality. He delves into Freud's dream symbols, linking them to the animal soul's generating urge and its clothing of impulses in familiar forms, often with phallic import. However, transcending the animalistic interpretation, the philosopher discovers a more exalted meaning in symbols, connecting them to deathlessness and permanence. Symbols, therefore, change meaning according to the interpreter's level of intelligence, continually revealing the insufficiency of the interpretations placed upon them. Hall critiques the popular fallacy that we grow by change, arguing that true growth is a sequential process, like a tree's consistent development from seed to fruit. He laments humanity's tendency to create faulty laws and schisms, demonstrating that man still demonstrates his kinship to the crab by making most of his progress in a backward fashion. He asserts that intellectual eclecticism, without deep analytical foundation, leads to fragmented thought. Hall emphasizes the necessity of approaching every issue with an adequate philosophic background, contrasting the confused and meaningless explanations of the untrained mind with the profound insights gained through philosophy. He highlights the therapeutic powers of symbols employed by the Phrygian dactyls and Paracelsus to influence the sick. The talking images and urns of prophecy of antiquity are explained not as literal communication with the dead, but as instruments that preserved words in the subtle ethers of cosmos and could render them audible after centuries. Pythagoras' use of hydromancy, divination through water ripples, and his veiled instruction, where only his feet were visible, illustrate how symbols and rituals were designed to bypass the physical senses and directly stimulate the rational soul. The keyhole philosophers, like Apostle Peter, represent those who guarded hidden wisdom, only revealing what could be grasped. Hall provocatively states that Christianity, as we have it today, is a philosophy revealed through a keyhole, a few mysterious words caught by an eavesdropper. He laments the literalist who profanes the beautiful by limiting all natures to form, mistaking appearance for inner quality. Maimonides, Origen, and Augustine are cited for acknowledging the hidden, non-literal meanings of scriptures which, for Hall, are philosophic anatomy concerned with man's inner constitution. He argues that no philosophy can survive translation if its true spirit is to be grasped, as it requires immersing oneself in the original cultural context. This leads to the profound realization that there is no such thing as modernism in human thought, for minds have labored since the beginning, and the world's first thinker reasoned out the same problems which the world's last sage must ponder. Hall sets forth 3 fundamental rules for symbolism. Every object can teach of divine order, knowledge of inferiors is necessary for superiors, and all natures are worthy of profound analysis. Thus, symbolism becomes a religion in itself, a means to discern God's omnipresence in his handiworks, with symbols as things standing for still greater things, the images of a transcendent perfectness, the witnesses of a sufficient truth, the evangelists of eternity. Ancient mystery rituals delves into the profound, often misunderstood purpose of ancient ceremonial and ritualism. Hall critiques the sophisticated Pharisees of the 20th century who disdain rituals as relics of a past age, arguing that such dismissal ignores the fact that humanity has not outgrown the evils of the past. He asserts that ages do not entirely end. Rather, the dregs of each dying era are dumped into the next, while the best is all too likely to die or remain obscured, awaiting rediscovery by a philosophic few. The past, unlike the elusive future, is the security of the wise, a sure foundation, rich with tender memories and wise experiences from which the child of the present draws its essence. Hall advocates for a ritualism that, unlike the decadent church, is filled with joy, reflecting the nature of a creator who is superhuman rather than inhuman. He champions the naturalness and sincerity of ancient religion, where worship was not sermonizing but a solitary quest for solitude in the presence of images, a drawing of mysterious strength. He challenges the notion of idolatry, arguing that reverencing a marble figure is not worshiping stone, but recognizing that subtle beauty caught in the ringlets of his ivory hair or held as though petrified in each fold of his flowing robe. The stone is not dead if it inspires men to weep, gives cowards courage, or unites a nation. He laments that modern, cold, gray churches have failed to capture this spirit of the beautiful, for the God of our salvation will not be captured in hard-lined lectern or graceless pulpit. He then provides a vivid, allegorical description of an initiate's journey through the mysteries. The candidate navigates subterranean crypts, first encountering mournful cadences of infernal music, representing the miseries of unrighteous living and the hopelessness of irrationality. He then passes into a chamber of erratic fire, desire, where dim forms in crimson draperies lure him with exotic harmonies. Next is a chamber of strange twilight and silent, swaying figures emanating disillusionment and despair, representing the futility of unproductive thought. Escaping these lower realms, the candidate enters a high-domed chamber brilliantly illumined by a massive globe of golden light, supported by 12 pillars, where inspired faces of priests contemplate the great mystery. Here, triumphant music thunders, and the Hierophant, a living light, initiates the candidate into an inner room where the inner meanings of the rituals were revealed. Here, the purpose of symbol and allegory was made known. The initiate is clothed in the robes of the mysteries, joining the circumambulations, sensing the universal rhythm that moves the planets in their orbits. Hall explains that rituals were originally designed to reveal to the inner perceptions the principle of universal order. and that they made the gods seem very near to man. He recounts how Nero feared the gods after murdering his mother, demonstrating that conscience manifests as a terror of divine proximity when one's inner nature is discordant. He defends Pythagoras, who, despite being accused of theatricality, employed dramatic situations for purposes of instruction, using a veil to obscure his physical form so that disciples would focus on the rational soul, speaking through him, not the man himself. His visible feet, extending beyond the veil, symbolized nature, the visible part of God. Hall contends that the art of ritualism, the science of divine dramatics, is crucial for conveying subtle facts incommunicable by any literal method. He delves into the destruction of the pagan mysteries, an event enigmatically called the death of Great Pan. While the Church claimed a mass conversion, Hall argues that the mysteries fell due to treachery and profanation, as initiates, persuaded by worthy ideals of spiritual equality, divulged sacred secrets only for the Church to later reverse its position and proceeded to retrench itself behind the very mysteries and rituals of the pagan institutions it had overthrown. This resulted in rituals losing their inner spirit, becoming mere mechanic operation. Hall concludes that Great Pan is not wholly dead, and a new age of beauty is dawning, where the gods of philosophy once more shall rule the world. A philosophic consideration of man presents man as the microcosm, a little universe, epitomizing all orders of life. Man is seen as an embryonic being, suspended in the matrix of the macrocosmos by a threefold umbilical cord of spirit from God, soul from stars, and body from earth. Hall uses alchemical terms, salt, terrestrial, sulfur, celestial, mercury, sidereal, to describe these three moving spirits that form man's philosopher's stone. These three monads, spirit, soul, body, create concentric spheres of consciousness, mirroring universal planes. The physical organism, devoid of permanence and rationality, is merely a whimsical gesture of the soul. Natural death is the soul's voluntary withdrawal from a decrepit body, while suicide is a misdirection of power where the body casts off the soul. Hall asserts that the rational soul is the spirit's most precious attribute, a god within the soul of man. If a life is ill, this spirit withdraws, and the soul is said to die, leading to possession by demons of the astral light, sorcerers, vampires, werewolves. Virtues, resident in the soul, serve as the bridge across which human consciousness passes to be united with its spiritual cause. The physical body, the outer framework, imprisons the higher nature during its exile in the material universe. The ancient priesthood, patterned after man's constitution, with the temple symbolizing the human body, reinforces this microcosm. The Pontifex Maximus, chief priest, represents the abiding unity of spirit served by flamines, breath's flames, analogous to man's three spiritual monads and the 12 holy animals, zodiacal signs that form his physical body. He reveals the Kabirian dwarf, a flame-like body equal in size to the last joint of a man's thumb, dwelling in the heart as the rational knower, a symbolic representation of the soul's immense superphysical magnitude, despite its physical inconsequence. This emphasizes that quality and not bulk is the true measure of size. Reincarnation is revisited as the spiritual agencies conspiring to produce the creature which we designate man, where sense stimulations are organized by the rational nature. Hall cites Plotinus, Proclus, and Hermes' arguments against literal transmigration into animal bodies, explaining that a depraved human soul might attach itself to an animal, verge toward the instinctive nature of the animal to gratify desires, causing the animal to exhibit human intelligence. Hermes, as the psychopomp or lord of souls, governs metempsychosis, memories, and recollections, acting as the scribe of the gods who records upon the tables of memory. He references Godfrey Higgins on the widespread ancient belief in metempsychosis, contrasting it with its modern rejection. Plato's enigmatic statement about the soul passing into a woman's body is interpreted in light of General Pleasanton's discovery of electrical repolarization through vice or excess, suggesting a philosophical, not literal, change in vital constitution. Hall introduces the idea of incarnation of deeds, where human attitudes materialize into living things, butterflies as beautiful thoughts, evil insects as destructive impulses, and plagues as minute organisms enlivened by the various emotions of men. This means man creates instruments for his own torment through his internal emotional progeny. The The Zohar is quoted to emphasize that sacred texts contain a loftier sense and a higher mystery, with narratives as mere cloaks for hidden truths accessible only to the instructed initiated. Man's body is also a vestment, concealing a most hidden doctrine, the house of hidden places where gods abide. Hall concludes that man's only hope of knowing is vested in himself, for his composite nature is a living instrument by which he can discover the secrets that lurk upon the very boundaries of space. The ladder of the gods vividly portrays the spiritual ascent as a grand staircase or mystic ladder of Jacob's vision, extending from material darkness to impenetrable spiritual darkness, illuminated midway by reason. Two streams of souls move upon it: virgin spirits descending into the noxious vapors of mortality, involution, death of the soul, and redeemed souls mounting upward, luminous, from the dismal underworld towards God evolution. Plotinus's explanation of the soul's voluntary inclination to descend for power and experience, yet suffering injury from its revolt, underscores the journey's inherent challenges and eventual reward of knowledge. Hall illustrates this relentless march of souls, from repulsive creatures crawling from mortal slime to slinking horrors, from the jungle, patient, sad-eyed, serving brutes, and the dim progenitor of man, all marching on through the ages toward inevitable perfection. Even the hero dead, scientists and philosophers ascend this ladder, culminating in radiant saviors who pass into the darkness of God, a spectacle Hall summarizes as God seeking God. He critiques decadent Brahmanism, which, by focusing on the letter of Manu's law, victimized the Sudras. Buddhism, in contrast, brought freedom in bondage, revealing the stairway of the immortals, and inspiring hope in the lowly, allowing the sinner to sense the hidden saint within. Philo-Judais's interpretation of Jacob's ladder as the superior or rational soul, upon which abstract thoughts of wisdom ascend and descend, reinforces this allegorical framework. The Hebrew word salam, ladder, suggesting lifted or exalted, links Jerusalem to the city of the ladder. Muhammad's golden rope ladder ascending to heaven from Mount Moriah further exemplifies this universal theme. The sacred mountains of the world, rising in 7 steps like the Hindu Meru with a triform symbol at the top, represent the Pythagorean decade and the tenfold order of the universe. The Mithraic ladder, a pyramid of 7 steps with metallic gates, Moon silver, Mercury brass, Venus copper, Sun gold, Mars iron, Jupiter tin, Saturn lead, symbolizes the aspirant's ascent, passing through planetary spheres to approach the threefold fire, universal life, light, and motion. The base of the pyramid is the square body. The 7 steps are the senses. The candidate's descent back down represents the soul taking on the sorrows of birth. Hall emphasizes that this divine motion is God, both drawing lives to himself and casting them from him, for both are necessary for valuing inspiration. The chemical marriage of Christian Rosenkreuz provides further symbolism with the vision of hanging sophists suspended by slender cords from heaven. An aged figure, Cronus Time, cuts these cords, demonstrating that dependence on false and dizzy heights leads to a fall. This allegory critiques Aristotelian schoolmen whose fallacies were already apparent. The thread of life, a Platonic cord, connects personality to its causal part, and when severed by Cronus, frees the objective nature from its causal principle. St. John's Apocalypse and Muhammad's night journey are also interpreted as ascents through spiritual knots or ganglia. The East Indian fable of Kundalini, a spirit fire descending and hiding in the sacral plexus when the umbilical cord is cut, symbolizes the hidden divine energy. The Shinto myth of Amaterasu, lured from her cave by a mirror reflecting her own light, illustrates how disciplinary effort can entice the rational soul to manifest its radiance. All these allegories, Hall concludes, signify the soul's ceaseless climb towards self, a bridge of reason across the vast interval between diversity and unity. Rosicrucian and Masonic origins unveils Freemasonry as a fraternity within a fraternity, an outer, visible organization concealing an inner brotherhood of the elect. Hall asserts that this invisible society, composed of veritable princes of truth and masters of that secret doctrine, is the true heart of Masonry, its spirit having walked with God before the universe was spread out. He criticizes modern Masons' indifference to their craft's profound secrets, suggesting they are obsessed by the fear that from their ritualism may be extracted a meaning more profound than is actually contained therein. The historical origins of Masonry are strangely elusive, with a dark interval of centuries separating modern lodges from the original mysteries that first employed their symbols. He points to Albert Pike's admission that the original meanings of the symbols are known to the modern order are irretrievably lost. Hall firmly establishes that the secret doctrine flowing through Masonic symbols has its source in three ancient and exalted orders: the Dionysiac Artificers, the Roman Collegia, and the Arabian Rosicrucians. The Dionysians were the master builders of the ancient world, entrusted with public edifices, with Hiram, king of Tyre, as their patron and Hiram Abiff as a grand master. They used builders' tools to conceal mysteries of the soul, likening man to a rough ashlar to be trued into a finished block for a living and eternal temple. The Roman Collegia were a branch of Dionysians whose initiates, like Vitruvius, carved Gnostic symbols into their works. The mysteries of Egypt and Persia, preserved in the Arabian desert, reached Europe through the Knights Templars and Rosicrucians. Hall implies that Jacques de Molay and his Templar Knights were persecuted not for wealth, but for the knowledge which they had brought with them from the East, part of the Great Arcanum. He asserts that truth is eternal, and what appear as revelations in different religions are merely re-emphasis of an ever-existing doctrine. Moses adapting Egypt's mysteries, Buddha adapting Brahmins, Jesus tearing the temple veil, Muhammad reforming paganism. Father C.R.C., the master of the Rosy Cross, gained profound knowledge from Arabians at Damcar and Fez, including the sacred Book M and secrets of elemental peoples, magic, alchemy, and the elixir of life. His Domus Sancti Spiritus was enveloped in clouds, rituals, and symbols, concealing the great arcanum. Paracelsus, Cagliostro, and Comte de Germain are cited as Arabian initiates and Rosicrucians who brought this hidden wisdom to Europe, influencing the political and sociological intrigue of the 17th-18th centuries. Freemasonry arose during this period, fueled by the divine prerogatives of humanity, being crushed by ignorance, superstition, and fear. The three ruffians, torch, crown, tiara. This led to the dream of democracy and re-establishing a golden age, with figures like Thomas More Utopia, Sir Walter Raleigh, and Sir Francis Bacon, New Atlantis, Novum Organum, as key proponents connected by a secret tie to emancipate humanity from ignorance and oppression. Hall reveals that Bacon, after feigning death in England, guided this philosophic fraternity from Germany. Elias Ashmole is noted as a link between Rosicrucianism and modern Masonry. Hall suggests a society of unknown philosophers. Alchemists, Kabbalists, astrologers existed, initially independent of the church but later infiltrated by ecclesiastics. The true adepts withdrew, maintaining the secret operative processes of the Greeks. Hall believes this inner and secret brotherhood of initiates still exist independent of the Freemasonic order, guarding the lost word. He passionately calls on Masons to recognize their true heritage, their high dignity as salt of the earth, light of the world, and the fire of the universe, living stones on a spiritual house. He critiques the prejudice of many modern Masons against the mysticism inherent in their craft, noting that figures like Albert Pike, a transcendental thinker, were pivotal in raising American Freemasonry. He challenges the degree teams of modern Masonry, contrasting them with the rigorous, life-threatening initiations of ancient pagan rites, Druids' Stormy Sea, Serapis' Chasm, Mithraic dematerialization, which truly conferred more than human status. Apuleius' account of his initiation into the Temple of Isis, where he approached to the confines of death and saw the sun shining with a splendid light, serves as an example of the profound transformative experience of ancient initiation. Hall urges Masons to be worthy successors to those master Masons of other ages, to clear the debris of a fallen culture and raise a new temple for a new revelation of law. Finally, the goal of philosophy projects a vision of the future rooted in the understanding that today is the hope of the world. Our actions, Hall insists, have eternal consequences. Our accomplishments survive us. He discusses the scientific concept of immortality through progeny, citing Luther Burbank's plant experiments where latent traits reappear across generations. While acknowledging this physical immortality, Hall argues that true immortality for man, as spirit, is not dependent on physical generation, but on its impartible and dimensionless essence. Heredity, he contends, is limited to accidents of form, merely influencing the vibration of its previous states, which the soul must then reorganize according to its own needs. Hall fundamentally opposes the premise of material supremacy, which he sees as wholly destructive of the moral sense, reducing ethics to superstition and aesthetics to vagaries. He laments humanity's boast of a godless age, where man, in his pride, has driven the divinities on high Olympus away, leaving him unhappy and fearful. He introduces Sir Francis Bacon's New Atlantis, a work describing an ideal philosophic empire, Bensalem, the Sons of Peace, or of the Ladder, ruled by Solomon's House, an order of illumined men dedicated to investigating life's laws. Hall suggests that America is this lost Atlantis, a new world for a government of the philosophic elect. He foretells a future where empires must fall due to selfishness, and a nobler era will emerge, marked by the abolition of boundaries, races, and castes, with one government, one administrative body, guided by the wisest of men. Hall argues that the average man is not strong enough or wise enough to rule himself, and that a true government must be led by illumined philosophers and mystics who are above personal interest. He critiques modern politics as a science of personal interests, and democracy as the aristocratic gesture of the proletarian, often failing because leaders too faithfully reflect their constituents' flaws. He calls for a rational government for the people, where wisdom, not popular whim, guides the state. He then synthesizes the various philosophic revelations that have shaped human culture, identifying key figures as epitomes of vast orders of learning: Manu Hindu law, Hermes, Egyptian statecraft, Orpheus, Greek beauty, Buddha, renunciation, Pythagoras, mathematics, Socrates, justice, Confucius, immanent worship, Jesus, friendship, and Mohammed, retribution. These diverse threads, Hall argues, must now be woven into a doctrine of synthesis, a common denominator for an interdependent world. He observes that humanity's increasing strength has also brought an ever-increasing capacity to injure, leading to devastating wars driven by selfishness and passion. He critiques friendship as an insufficient remedy for societal ills, as it can be perverted by interest and fails to overcome the sense of separateness. The ultimate message for the new age is the gospel of identity. This is not an effort to unite lives in common interest, but a recognition of the fact that all forms are but manifestations of one indivisible agent. It means that there are no longer two who can be friends, but one that cannot be divided, where diversity is an illusion of form, not a reality of spirit. This gospel shatters the competitive standard of civilization, which is based on the erroneous assumption that one part can survive at the expense of another. Intellectual understanding alone is insufficient. Realization of identity is required. This realization forms the true basis of democracy, not as a political system, but as the realization of the unity of life. The goal of philosophy is to guide man from an involuting civilization of separateness to a state of profound unity, where one man should compete with another is as senseless as that the fingers should fight the hands. It is to help man overcome his littleness and realize his true greatness in the vastness which is his real self, achieving philosophic liberation. The cure for selfishness is the realization that nothing can be added to us and nothing taken from us, that we are what we are and have what we have. In this ultimate state, there is consequently neither giver nor receiver, in that the gift, the giver, and the receiver are one. Hall concludes with an ecstatic vision. We are not gods. We are God exiled for a little while into the forgetfulness of ourselves, yet soon to awaken to the full measure of our splendor. He calls upon slumbering humanity to awake from your dreams of manyness and soar into the free air of concord, to rebuild civilization upon the foundation of truth and reality, and to dedicate their lives to the great life which is our true self, the tomorrow which to us must ever be the now. Hall's final words are a powerful testament to the enduring purpose of philosophy, to reveal man's divine potential and guide him toward a glorious, unified destiny. Thank you for joining us at Occult Mysticism to unravel the wisdom of lectures on ancient philosophy. If Manly P. Hall's insights into esoteric truths inspired you, share your thoughts in the comments and spread the light with fellow seekers. Like, subscribe, and hit the bell to stay tuned for more mystical book summaries. Keep exploring the hidden depths of the universe with us.